First of all, I'd just like to give you a brief outline. The whole purpose of this is to explain about neglected tropical diseases, the problem, and the role that Dundee is playing towards tackling these problems. Now, Scotland has a very long and distinguished history in tropical disease research. The most famous person, of course, is probably David Livingstone, who travelled across Africa and indeed at one point treated his horses. They were called fly-struck because they were being bitten by tsetse flies. He treated them with an arsenic solution called Fowler's solution. And Fowler's solution, this arsenic concoction, was used rather like used car salesmen put sawdust in a dodgy gearbox of a car. And the point was that if you wanted to sell a worn-out nag with a rather poor coat, if you gave it arsenic, the arsenic was secreted into the fur and they became nice and shiny. So it was thought to be a general tonic. And in actual fact, that was probably the first attempt at treating sleeping sickness. But we'll come back to that later. So I've been asked to give you a little bit of personal history, why I got interested in this, background to neglected tropical diseases, why we need new drugs, and what the Drug Discovery Unit is doing to address this. So my background is that my father was a public health physician, and I got exposed when I was a young boy to bacteria and parasites. So he'd bring back agar plates with molds and bacteria growing on them, saying, "Look at this, Alan." And on one occasion, he upended my younger brother and said, "Just look at this, parasitic worms, pinworms," for me to admire. So I was exposed to everything from bacteria to wormy parasites from an early date. So the thing that transformed my thinking actually was when I was at school and I was targeted for medicine by the headmaster. And during one of the A-level biology classes, the teacher, Danny McNaughton, said to me, said to the group, "You don't need to know this," he said, "but I've just read the Scientific American, and it has this article on the mitochondrion, the powerhouse of the cell." And basically he then went on to spend the whole lesson teaching us how basically a living organism can generate chemical energy by means of breaking down sugars through the citric acid cycle. And I thought, wow, chemical machines, that's amazing. Cells are chemical machines. And of course, human beings are highly sophisticated chemical machines, as you all know. So then I went to medicine, to University of Edinburgh to study medicine. And we had a classical, preclinical, and then clinical course in those days, and I loved biochemistry and managed to get onto an intercalated degree to study biochemistry at the honours level with all the biochemists. And at the end of the course, I was joking to one of the lecturers that I was looking for a job in a brewery. I thought, I know how to look after yeast now, I understand their metabolism. And he said to me, "Would you like a summer job?" And I said, "Really? What on?" And he said, "Trypanosomes. What are they?" So he takes me up to the lab and he explains to me about trypanosomes and sleeping sickness, and I was hooked. That was me off. And so I walked away on an ancient old apparatus for measuring oxygen consumption. And at the end of the 10 weeks, I said to him, "Do you think I could stop medicine and do a PhD with you?" And he went, "You better go and speak to the head of biochemistry." So I went to speak to the head of biochemistry, and he went, "You better go and speak to the Dean of Medicine." So the Dean of Medicine went, And he said, you know, if you finish your medical degree, you'll have a much broader perspective on the problems of infectious disease. So why don't you do that? Oh, and by the way, when you have your elective periods where you can choose what you want to do, why don't you do laboratory work? So that's what I did. Instead of delivering babies or stitching cut heads in accident and emergency, I went to the laboratory. So I knew what I wanted to do. I got my license to kill, and then went straight into a PhD. So since then I've worked in Amsterdam, New York, London, a lot of different places on various types of research project and on different types of parasite.